This past weekend, the Scenic City Invitational in Tennessee was the site of this man's final wrestling match with an asterisk attached to that, adding that proclamation in his closing speech. He's a product of the Vancouver wrestling scene who took his talents to the US, Europe, and abroad. Along the way, paying tribute to Randy Johnson, he is now the 99% retired Daniel Makabe, who joins us on Post Wrestling. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to chat with you.
That was a very verbose introduction, throwing out the Randy Johnson nod. But yes, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
You get to do verbose when you're doing the wrestling retirement, and there was a big spotlight on this past weekend, several days removed from the match, and I'm sure a lot of people reaching out to you. What has the reception been like, and hearing from people that got to view the match, the speech afterwards? How are you feeling several days removed?
I feel good. I was really happy with the match, and really, I've read one negative review who thought that there was too much blood. But beyond that, everything I read seems to be quite positive, and everyone who's directly reaching out to me is very positive. And the people who were in the building, many of whom traveled from very far distances to be there, were beyond supportive and positive. So yeah, no, I personally feel very good and accomplished about the events of this past weekend, for sure. Yeah.
Going backward, why now? Why are you calling it a career at this stage for you? What was 40 like an end date for you? What led to the decision and also the event at Scenic City Invitational?
It's 100% health related. So I had a pretty bad back injury when I was 25 years old in a match. That I had a compression fracture in one of my lower vertebrae and two bulging discs when I was 25 years old. And I took like a year and a half off then in my 20s, did physio, etc. And then really wasn't all that active in my 20s. It was really in my mid 30s where my schedule really picked up a lot. And it was June of 2022, so a little over 2 years ago, that I was in a match here in Vancouver where I took a back suplex and re-aggravated that injury from 10 plus years prior. And that has been something that's been nagging that I've been dealing with for the last 2 years now, doing physio. I missed the last kind of 6 months of 2022 and left things kind of open-ended, just, not knowing whether or not I would be able to continue with any kind of regular schedule. Yeah, I always had the goal of making it to 40. I always had the goal of making it to 20 years since my first professional match, which was in November of 2003 at the Cloverdale Fairgrounds, home of all-star wrestling from the 80s and onwards. And I accomplished both of those things. So, I hit 20 years this past November. I hit the ripe old age of 40 this past April. And Scenic City is like the scene like no other that has supported me truly, more so than really any community elsewhere in the world, although there's plenty of other places that I've had great matches and enjoy wrestling. The people in and around Chattanooga, Tennessee have taken to me like no other, and it just felt like an appropriate place to call it a career. And so I kind of set the wheels in motion and did a little bit of backwards computing probably like 9 months ago, where I went, okay, SCI is the place. Let's knock off a bunch of matches between now and then. And hopefully it feels like I've accomplished something in the process, and hindsight it does. So
tell me a bit about your relationship as well with Kevin Koo, who was your final opponent. It was very cool to see not just the two of you share the ring afterward, but as well, I mean, he spoke about online just how big of an honor this was for him to be asked to be part of your last match.
Yeah, Koo is someone who I met the first time that I wrestled in the South. Actually, I wrestled for a company called Southern Underground Pro based in Nashville, which is kind of inactive now due to a variety of reasons, most of which is none of them live in Nashville anymore. But Koo was living in Nashville promoting shows, and him and Dylan Hales, who is associated with SCI and IWTV and all those promotions down there, they brought me down to work in the fall of 2018. And Ku and I just kind of hit it off right off the get-go. We had a lot of similarities outside of wrestling when it comes to just interests, music, just our personalities. And we fastly became very good friends over the course of the last 6 years, I guess. So much so that this past May, he was one of the groomsmen in my wedding in the greater Seattle area. Um, and we may only see each other a handful of times a year, but he's someone that I talk to regularly. And it just felt like I wanted it to be someone with more significance than like a good opponent, like a Tim Thatcher, who I have a history with and have very good matches with. And I would consider him a friend as well, but he's kind of elusive. But Ku is someone who just has a little bit of a deeper connection to myself. He's also from the South, so he has a connection to that scene. And he's someone who I had a match that we both highly regard in January of 2020, right before the pandemic in Nashville, that we both liked, but both thought we could build upon and improve upon. And so I wanted the opportunity to do so.
You mentioned the fact of like the pandemic, and that seemed to be I first got to meet you here in Toronto over SummerSlam weekend, which you're coming off winning SCI the prior weekend, and then that weekend you're wrestling for WXW, and then you're going over there right in the midst of like the pandemic beginning and such. How was it a frustration for you at the time that right as you're building this international profile that the world essentially stops and pro wrestling is part of that?
Uh, yes and no. So like I was actually in Germany when the world
Yeah.
shut down. Basically, I was doing WXW 16 Carat tournament that year. I had some bookings in England and Ireland. The only one that was actually canceled was in Ireland because they had taken restrictions a little bit more serious than some of the other countries over there. Um, there was definitely some there were some pretty high profile bookings that I had. WrestleMania that year was going to be in Tampa. I had
Right.
5 or 6 pretty high profile bookings. Jonathan Gresham. I was supposed to wrestle Nick Gage in Tampa that year, which had been announced. And like a who's who. I had a WXW Ambition tournament that year set up for Tampa. So I always feel like that's kind of a lost weekend for me that would have led to bigger things that obviously didn't happen. But on the flip side is that I was battling some pretty bad nagging injuries at that
Hmm.
point, and I'd actually been batting around the idea of taking the entire spring of 2020 off anyways after WrestleMania weekend, coming back for SCI that year, which would have been in July. So taking a few months off to rehab these injuries. And when the pandemic first happened, I thought, okay, I was worried I was going to be missing all this time. I was going to lose out on bookings. Independent wrestling is very much a what have you done for me lately, in that, out of sight, out of mind. But I thought, okay, well, now everyone's going to be missing bookings. So we're all kind of on an even playing field. So, joke's on me that it just went on in Vancouver, there were no shows for 18 months. It was September of 2021 until they allowed shows back here again. I had a handful of matches in the United States and went through a real undertaking and able to get to the United States to work shows in the interim. Part of that is also because my partner, now wife, is American and lives in Seattle. So I was traveling down there to see her and then tacking bookings on in the meantime. But the pandemic definitely was frustrating and definitely killed my momentum. No way around it, for sure.
Do you feel, especially specific to the Pacific Northwest and Vancouver, how has the scene recovered in the past couple of years, or has it to kind of the pre-pandemic scene? Because that was always a concern. Was a lot of people that might just during those 18 months or so just decide I'm going to seek work elsewhere and not pursue a career in pro wrestling.
I genuinely think that Vancouver, the scene here, is the best it's ever been currently.
Mm-hmm.
There absolutely were people who had that attitude towards pro wrestling here, but subsequently, the amount of talent that's bubbled up, some people who were already, active and have just kind of upped their game and gotten more exposure on themselves, traveling all over North America or even abroad, as well as we have a fantastic school here called the Lionsgate Dojo in Surrey, British Columbia, run by some very talented and skilled trainers and professional wrestlers themselves, Nicole Matthews, Artemis Spencer, Tony Baroni, and Billy Swade. And they have just been the busiest they've ever been, with people who are genuinely excited to get into the industry and help support. And subsequently, we have, probably 4 or 5 promotions here in Greater Vancouver that are running pretty regularly. And then also our close proximity to other pretty big cities in the Northwest, Portland and Seattle and surrounding areas. You can honestly work a very full-time schedule being based in Vancouver, British Columbia nowadays. You might not get a ton of attention on you because of how far removed we are from the rest of the world, but it's honestly the best time ever to be a pro wrestler in Vancouver, as far as I'm concerned.
I wanted to ask you a bit about kind of your approach, as especially over like the last decade, where you seem to find like your very unique lane and just go with it. And it came with a lot of acclaim that people had for Daniel Makabe, and seeing him, like your style and how it would mesh with others. Was that something conscious that you had in terms of, I want to differentiate myself in a field of all these different styles, all these different wrestlers, what I can make unique to me that's going to make me in demand to promoters? Did you give it like that level of thought when you were sort of ascending in your career and getting outside of just Vancouver as well?
Absolutely. 100%. It's all very conscious and thought out, even down to years ago. I changed my theme music to a song called Providence by a band from Montreal called Godspeed You Black Emperor, which it's a 29-minute long song. Now, my theme is only a 2-minute segment of it, but it's completely rhythmless, vocalless, ethereal, ambient. And when I started using it, it was because I wanted to stand out and I wanted to have this unconscious connection with people where they thought, okay, this is different. This is weird. I'm not sure if I like this. It's not what I'm used to in wrestling as far as entrance music, setting the table for what's about to unfold. And I think that kind of sums up my approach when it comes to all aspects of professional wrestling. I think it helps that I have a lot of influences and jumping off points that are inspirations to me to do stuff that's a little out of the box with what is more commonplace in independent wrestling nowadays, for sure. When it comes to old, shoot style, European style, old, Yave style luchadors. I'm definitely a sum of my influences of the parts. And they are influences that have really like niche, fervent fan bases. And it's those people who have kind of picked up on what I'm doing and have become my greatest champion for sure in the last 5-6 years. All of that is calculated. Absolutely.
Are there any that you can name of people that maybe, especially when you were younger, that you got to see for the first time and realizing, wow, this is professional wrestling too, and it's so far outside the box of what kind of my brain took pro wrestling to be? Were there any of those people that kind of showed you like there are many different ways to do this, and left that kind of imprint on you?
I mean, like big ones are like kind of the tent poles of like their genre. So like Johnny Saint, the first time you see like 70s UK World of Sports stuff, he's the one who jumps off the map, obviously. Not that I say that I necessarily work like him. Like I maybe was more influenced in the last couple of years by someone like a John Cortez or a Terry Rudge, or unfortunately Jim Breaks. discovering shoot style. Obviously, there's a strong lineage that kind of jumps off from New Japan in the 80s and into the 90s. And I loved all that stuff. But the first time I discovered Volkan in rings, he's just so different than what everyone else is doing, and is so ahead of his time. And I've definitely liberally been inspired or taken things from him for sure. And I don't think I'm definitely not a British style wrestler or a shoot style wrestler or like an old man lucha style wrestler, but I can do a little bit of each of it and kind of make it my own. But yeah, those are some big ones that jump off the page to me when you ask that question.
Just going back to the match on Friday, was this a match that, did you put a lot on your shoulders going into this match that I want it to come off a certain way? I want to leave. I want to feel something. Did you place that pressure on yourself, or did you try to kind of remove yourself from, the fear of expectation and it being above?
You know what? I never used to get nervous, ever. In the last couple of years, I feel a lot more nerves when it comes to my output. I think I also used to watch every single match that I had like immediately afterwards, and I've struggled to keep up with that practice in the last couple of years, and that has been due to putting too much pressure on myself and what people think and what people are saying of my matches, and that just expectations in general, both from a live standing, from a reactionary standing afterwards from people. I don't know. I kind of set standards. You kind of, people expect a certain level of match when they hear my name on a card nowadays, and so I was doing my best to not succumb to those expectations and those standards. I don't recall being all that nervous on Friday, if I'm being honest. I think the setting helped kind of keep my mind at ease. The opponent helped keep my mind at ease. The fact that a lot of the ideas that I had on paper leading up to this match of things that I thought would be good storytelling devices and elements to the match have been things I've been thinking about for months at this point, as like, hey, this would be a cool thing to do in your final match. It all just felt very natural to me. Honestly, the thing I was most worried about was bleeding, because I hadn't done that in a very long time. And
you made up for lost time.
I was about to say, maybe there's a reason I shouldn't have been doing it, because I overdid it a little bit. But even that added to the drama and overall presentation, I think, an added element that people wouldn't have necessarily expected. If you read on paper Daniel Makabe's final match, they wouldn't expect like a lucha style bloodbath. Yeah, not so much.
I thought it added a lot. I mean, people are going to have their feelings on excessive blood, but I thought it really upped the drama and like just the audience, like you can hear like some of the gasps as you come up off the floor, and it really does take the match to another level as well. You might not want to share, but right before you deliver your almost final big unit punch at the end, you whisper something into Kevin Koo's ear. Can you share what message you might have shared to Kevin, if that is for public consumption?
How much do I want to peel back the curtain? I hope people can separate the product on the screen, and this is like a director's commentary on a DVD, but that was inspired by the final scene in the Sofia Coppola film Lost in Translation, where Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson they meet up with each other in Japan, and they have kind of parted ways, and they just randomly meet each other in passing on the streets as they're kind of both departing. And Murray whispers something in her ear, and you never know what he says. And they never reveal in public after the fact what he says. And that was the inspiration behind that. So that was why the moment existed, but I can't tell you what I said.
That's wonderful. It's great to leave that interpretation for everyone out there. I wanted to go back before we wrap things up. So this was earlier this year, Bryan Danielson was on he was interviewed on Casual Conversations with Justin Dillon, and I'm going to play this clip and then get your reaction.
There's also a company in Portland that's doing some cool stuff. It seems like they put their shows up on YouTube.
I think you're right.
Like
is it Prestige? I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's Prestige.
Yeah.
They do the Cascadia Cup. They just did Daniel Makabe and Zack Sabre Jr.
That's
think.
awesome.
Yeah.
Makabe's dope too. He's like, a lot of people probably don't know who Daniel Makabe is. Like, check him out. You guys know who Zack Sabre is. But,
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I heard Daniel Makabe was retiring this. Was retiring this year, and I was like, oh, that would be a cool one.
It would, yeah.
And so it's like, but
you put it out there now. We'll see. What
yeah.
So I want to get your reaction when you first heard this clip, and there's this retirement countdown, and this, I guess, is the creation of the asterisk that you have added to your pretty hardline retirement announcement.
Yeah. So I first heard it because Post Wrestling reported on it.
Andrew Thompson, he finds it all.
Yeah, and I was actually in the building. AEW was doing Collision in Vancouver when that kind of came out, and when my phone just blew up. People were coming up to me in the building saying, "Have you seen this? Did you see what Bryan said?" It's funny. Fans always took it a certain way as like, oh, we need to try and get it in before July. We need to try and sneak it in before July. And I knew just how wrestling works from a logistics standpoint. That wasn't going to happen. The only way it would happen is you hot shot me onto an episode of Collision or something. And that's never been a goal of mine, nor did it sound particularly appealing to me. And so it kind of dawned on me, like, I had this, angel devil on my shoulder kind of thing. Like, I said that July 12th is a hard out, and I truly believe that. But this Danielson match presented itself and as something that, how could I say no to that? He's only a couple years older than me, but, I was a teenager going to independent shows here in the Northwest, and he was here like every other month, and we were punishing him about Ring of Honor and the Super 8s and all those things. And he was incredibly patient with me and my friends, but his influence on me is undeniable. It's always a match that's been a dream for years, but was never conceivable. And that clip from him made it conceivable. This has been a big year for me where I get to do kind of all the things I wanted to do and go all the places I wanted to go and wrestle all the people that I wanted to wrestle before I was done. And kind of parallel to that is Bryan's, 2024 has been him going to Japan to wrestle Sabre, Mexico to wrestle Blue Panther, basically wrestle a who's who of whoever he wants on television, from Hechicero to obviously, renewing the feud with Adam Page. I think there's a symmetry there between the two of us, and I think him coming back for one final match on the independents against me would be pretty neat. And I think I'd be I'd feel at ease, especially if it happens in the next couple months. I don't really want it to happen a couple years down the line when I've been retired for however long. But he said what he said, and I've subsequently said what I've said, both online and then at the the culmination of my match with Ku. And it's all out there for everyone. If any promoters out there who want to book it, that'd be appreciated.
The DMs are open at Daniel Makabe, and to whatever company books this, you can also take this clip to use it in your hype video as well. So this could all come together at some point. We'll wrap this up, Daniel. I'd be remiss, and I know obviously it's a very heavy topic, but you've been through a lot over the past month. You mentioned in your speech afterwards the passing of your good friend Scott Hensen, which just came out of nowhere. I'm sure this has been a very difficult last month for you. Was the match over the weekend, and getting to speak about him as well, has it been therapeutic for you over this past month? Is it still something that is weighing very heavily on you?
It weighs on me, but getting to speak about him so much has been really therapeutic. It's brought together groups of friends who hadn't seen each other in years, groups of friends who had fallen out. People have all kind of rallied together to, you know, tell his story and make sure that he's not forgotten and he's acknowledged as being someone who was significant in his walks of life, both independent wrestling, comedy, streaming, all that sort of stuff. He was a very big presence in a lot of people's lives. And yeah, he's someone that I've known for over half of my life, and our friendship is the reason why I'm here, because it led to me going to wrestling school and traveling all over the world and meeting a lot of the people and making a lot of the connections that I did that, you know, ended up being pretty significant later on in life. So yeah, the fact that my final match was the day before his birthday, it felt necessary to bring it up. People were bringing him up to me in Chattanooga, people who had met him once or twice, people who had never met him, but just knew all about him. Yeah, I mean, there have been hard moments, obviously. Like, I canceled a couple dates in Ontario because I just really wasn't feeling up to wrestling at that point. It was just too fresh, too new. But subsequently, I was already ready to retire. But, you know, his unfortunate passing really sped up the process. And now I can, you know, I feel at peace, and I'm glad that we had our final match. You could, you know, see it online. We had a tag team match for a promotion called SOS in Tacoma, Washington, literally less than a day before he passed away. And so I'm so thankful that at least we have that forever, that that memory and that moment captured on video, no less. That proved to be a lot more important than I just thought it was. Oh, this is match 13 on the retirement tour against my old buddies. You know, sometimes moments in life take on a whole other importance in hindsight. So, yeah.
Well, I think I think it was a wonderful tribute that you provided after the match last Friday. We'll end it there, but if people want to go and check out the match with Kevin Koo and the whole Scenic City Invitational, which is grown to become one of the preeminent tournaments out there, independentwrestling.tv. It's the first night with Daniel Makabe and Kevin Koo, and I'm sure that there's going to be aspiring wrestlers that are going to go down the Daniel Makabe rabbit hole one day, with a lot out there that people can seek out as well. And Daniel, I want to congratulate you on a great career. I hope you get the one more match down the road as well. Not too long down the road. But we really appreciate this time with you and making the time to come on and chat with me. I really appreciate it.
Honest, thank you. The pleasure is all mine. And yeah, check out the match if you haven't seen it. Most of my matches, you know, the 2024, the year Daniel Makabe broke, as I've labeled it, they're basically all but one are available online via YouTube or IWTV. And yeah, I hope that I'm some kids, you know, white whale down the line. When they do some figurative crate digging, they discover, who's this guy? I've never heard of him, and then, you know, are inspired to do something great. That would be amazing, truly.
There will be some future Twitter/X account where they're just going to X watch Daniel Makabe. That's going to be the whole tweet and link to you. We thank you very much for the time, Daniel.
Thank you.